What did you know about Vietnam and what were your perspectives on Vietnam before coming here?
I'm a little bit sensitive to that too. I don't want to label somebody or a country or a person who comes from a country because they had a war or were surrounded by war that identifies them. When I came to Vietnam, I realized that nobody really talks about war or has any prejudice against Americans nowadays. Everybody was just really welcoming.
Welcome back to another episode of a Vietnam podcast with me, your host, Neil Mackay. I've been living in Vietnam since 2016, first arrived in 2015 for a holiday, came back, was going to be here for 6 weeks, fell in love with the place, couldn't leave, loved the energy of Saigon, loved everything that Vietnam has to offer. And that 6 weeks became 3 months, then it became 1 year, then 2 years, then 4 years, then COVID happened. And then it's now turned into coming up on 10 years very, very shortly. So obviously I love Vietnam. I started this podcast because I wanted to know more about the people that lived here. We started as a Saigon podcast, then became a Vietnam podcast. And we are now the longest running English language podcast in Vietnam. And we are about to hit maybe very, very shortly 100,000 downloads, which to some people you might be like, the podcast I listen to gets 1 million downloads. For sure, there's definitely podcasts that get way more than this. But when I first started in 2019, I was going to be happy if 15 people listened, and we're about to hit 100,000, and we're getting more and more people listening all the time. So thank you so much to you for tuning into this episode, because honestly, I wouldn't still be doing it if it wasn't for you still listening to this and still enjoying it. And I'm really excited to share the stories of people connected to Vietnam. And that's what this podcast is all about. So every episode, we share stories of people that live here or live overseas that have a story to share about Vietnam. And so I'm really excited to talk to my guest today. She's a Slovenian actor, singer, and writer. I've actually bought some Slovenian wine off of her. Now, despite what you might think, it was delicious. I don't know what you're thinking, but it was delicious. It's not Dalat wine. It was very, very good. And I actually saw a play that she co-directed called Almost Maine, which was incredible to see. It was amazing to watch live art, I guess, here in Vietnam, here in Saigon. As an English speaker, we don't get that much live drama, live performances, things like this in Saigon and in Vietnam. If you're from here and you speak Vietnamese, there's absolutely loads, but as an English speaker, there's not that much. And so it was incredible to see this. It was an amazing venue and an amazing play. So she did an absolutely incredible job on that. And this person as well, I've actually never really spent some time with in real life, even though we've had lots of interactions online, and she's always been absolutely lovely. So my guest today is Alenka Moze. Alenka, thank you very much for coming on a Vietnam podcast.
Thank you, Niall, and congratulations on your podcast, and I'm honored to be a part of it today.
Oh, thank you very much. You're very, very welcome. And I just want to make sure, did I say your last name correctly?
Almost. I mean, Moze. It's
Moze.
Moze.
I was so close.
The Vietnamese now. I don't think there's a sound for in English language. That's why I don't hear it. I was trying to find a word that has that letter. I mean, the sound, but I haven't come across it yet. Anyhow.
Well, the English language is made up of about 500 different accents, and with mine being Scottish, I don't even know what English is anymore, to be honest. I mean, I've lived in the States, Australia, New Zealand, and Vietnam now for so long. People ask me, like, oh, what word do you guys use, or what's the sound, like you just said, and I'm like, I actually don't know. So, Moze.
Yes, thank you.
That was better. So my first question is there a big Slovenian community in Saigon and in Vietnam?
So there are 5 people that I know of. But Slovenia is a tiny country. We have 2 million people in the entire country. So actually, considering that, 5 people in Vietnam, actually, yeah, I think that's a total in Vietnam, not just Saigon. Maybe 5 or 6, yeah.
And do you have a Facebook group with all 5 of you on there? Or like a chat, a WhatsApp chat?
We have a chat, yeah. So we sometimes meet up and have a barbecue or something. It's really nice. It's nice to speak in my own language, but it's a bit awkward because like you're surrounded by like both English and Vietnamese speaking. So it's just all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, I'm speaking my own language now. And it feels unnatural almost.
That's pretty cool though. So you said a barbecue. Is there a specific type of Slovenian food? And do I say Slovenian or Slovenian? Which is correct?
Whichever you prefer. Both are correct.
Both are correct? Okay. I've always used Slovenian, so I'll go with that.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, there are a couple of dishes, like there is this Slovenian dessert called potica. And a couple of years ago, a Slovenian friend, his wife was Vietnamese. She prepared it, and we were all just, well, happy and fascinated because it was tasty and because she made it as a Vietnamese person. Other than that, there are dishes that we share with the Balkans. So there's this, it's called cevapcici. I'm not sure if you know of it. There's a restaurant in Tallinn that offers this particular dish. A lot of meat, very heavy, but very tasty.
And what about, so I have a friend from Ukraine. I don't know, do you share any kind of culinary dishes with Ukraine, or is it completely separate?
Not that I know of. I think it's pretty separate. Yeah. I did. I traveled when I was in my 20s. I hitchhiked around there, but not Ukraine. I traveled through Hungary, Slovakia, Poland, and up north. And all of the dishes that they offered, 'cause I visited some places. Honestly, I've never seen them before. So not really. I don't think we have, maybe ingredients are the same, but not the dishes.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. Do you have a lot of cabbage and beetroot in your diet, in your culinary cuisine?
No, not really. I mean, cabbage maybe, yeah. Beetroot,
All right, then I guess it's quite
not
different,
really.
because I always make fun of Nesta and our mum because everything, I just say everything has cabbage in it, but it obviously doesn't. But they make some delicious
Okay.
beetroot soup.
Right. No, we don't have beetroot soup, but I mean, of course, these plants are available. It's just that I don't know any particular dishes that would like specify these and or highlight them.
So you traveled around Europe. What brought you to Vietnam then?
I think it was a travel bug. So apart from, well, now I'm an actor and a singer, but actually my profession is being a teacher, and I taught back home for 2 years before I moved here. And you know how it is. Like I taught in the countryside, and it was beautiful, absolutely picturesque to drive over there from the capital city every. But the thing is, like, I lived elsewhere before. I studied in Finland, did my thesis there, and then all of a sudden, like, I just love traveling. And after 2 years of working in one place, I really needed to go somewhere else. So I thought, like, you know what, I can always return and do the same thing here. But I need to go somewhere and experience a different culture. So I wanted to experience a radically different culture from what is Slovenian or Finnish, or the climate. And so my friend, she experienced Vietnam because she was here for a year. And when I was deciding where to go, she recommended it because she told me that they do need teachers. So I was like, okay, that might be the place to go then. We'll see how it goes.
So tell me a bit more about the transition then from Slovenia to Vietnam.
It was very good. I bought a ticket. Actually, I didn't really know. So I was teaching at that point. So students knew that I was going to leave because I told them. And then they kept asking, teacher, where are you going to go? Where are you going to? And at that point, I really didn't know. But one day I was just so fed up with the question. I mean, not fed up, but like more maybe be embarrassed that I just said Vietnam. And that's where I'm going. And I stuck to it. So
That
I
was the
didn't have
reason why you
any,
chose Vietnam.
yeah, it was just, that's it. It's and the friend that I mentioned before, she had a couple of contacts, which is always helpful, right? To just like introduce you to the place, right? To the new country. So I literally didn't have anything planned. I bought a ticket. I was really afraid that I'd have to return within a month not finding a job or whatever. So I didn't even have a leaving party or anything. I was like, I'm not gonna advertise this because what if it doesn't work out? I'm just gonna be like, imagine this saying, goodbye, everyone. I'll see you whenever I see you in 2 years or whatnot. And then 1 month later, I'm sorry, guys, I'm broke. So I didn't want to advertise it. I just bought a plane ticket and went. But then I was really lucky. The contacts that I had here, the couple of people were amazing. An American Vietnamese couple. They just gave me a list of all the schools around. They were like, okay, go here, 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 here. And within, I'd say within a month or even less, I got a job, my first job here. So I was happy.
Nice. So what did you know about Vietnam before you came here, before you blurted out one day in class, Vietnam?
I think very little. I was not that bothered. Like I know that if you have like, let's say Americans that be like, oh, Vietnam, they think of war. And But of course, I'm from Slovenia, so that was not my first thought. Of course, I knew about it, but my thing is, like, my friend had told me how it was, how life is in Vietnam and how beautiful it is and what cuisine they have. And so most information, apart from the basics that we all have, was from the friends. And I'm the kind of person who doesn't really plan much in advance. That's not an asset, by the way. I'm not saying that that's a good thing. It's a really bad thing, but I'm just bad at planning. So it's just a jackass basically. And I was like, okay, let's give it a try. But I did know that what I knew is that people are really nice and the cuisine is amazing and that it's hot. Just in Saigon.
It's really interesting what you just said there, that because you're from Slovenia, the first thought that came to mind wasn't the war, because I remember reading Trevor Noah's book, and he talked about how, being from South Africa, they didn't have the same perspective on World War II that the rest of the world had. Like, everybody knew Hitler was bad. Everyone knew about the Holocaust. We were taught about it in school. And he was like, as a South African, and I guess with his background in South Africa, he was like, I didn't really know much about that. There's a whole passage in his book he talks about Hitler used to be one of the most common names in South Africa, which obviously it's a real name, and now it's not. Well, now it's banned, essentially. But, you know, he tells a really funny story about there was a kid in his class called Hitler, and they went to a Jewish school to do a performance, and everyone was chanting this guy's name, and the kids and the teacher were aghast, but they didn't know that it was like a bad thing. And so that, for me, is as well, coming to Vietnam and going to the War Remnants Museum for the first time. I'd known of that phrase that history is written by the winners, but that was the first time I'd seen it in action. So when I went to the War Remnants Museum, and I assume you've been there, and if anyone who's listening hasn't been there, it's one of the most emotional and jarring experiences that I've ever had. And for most people, I say it's the same. I definitely cried when I came out of there. It's one of the few things I think in Saigon that really, you know, it's a War Remnants Museum. Saigon is just a big, bustling, metropolitan, cosmopolitan city, and it gets on with life, and there aren't any remnants of the war around. But this museum goes into detail, and it shares a perspective of the war from the Vietnamese perspective, which is completely different to what I knew of Vietnam. I knew of the war, which admittedly wasn't much. I'm from Scotland. We learned about when Scotland had been taken over by the English in primary school. We weren't learning much about the Vietnam War. I know from American friends, they obviously were taught about the Vietnam War and from a very different perspective. And then you go to this museum and you're like, oh, okay, right, okay, this is another perspective. I'm not saying either are accurate. As always, the truth lies somewhere in the middle, but you're like, oh, this is a different perspective. So it's really interesting. You're one of the first people I've ever spoken to in person who grew up without that perspective. So what did you know about Vietnam then growing up, and what did you know about the Vietnam War, and what were your perspectives on Vietnam before coming here?
So I just wanted to back up a little bit what you were saying about the thing. I knew that the war had ended in 1975, and I assumed that, you know, since it was fairly recent, that there will be still some elements in the society present. I think it shows in how quickly or slowly it adapts to the modern world, because they were closed for so many years, and of course had a war going on, right? But and I do agree, like the War Remnants Museum is a very difficult experience I mean, it's tough. When my niece visited, she was 17 at the time. I took her to the War Remnants Museum, but I regretted it afterwards. I was like, oh my God, she's only 17. That was a bit much, really. I mean, she's tough, but still. But you know what? The thing is, I grew up in Slovenia, so first of all, nobody knows what that is, or very few people do. And while I was growing up around the age of, like, in the 90s, there was the war in Bosnia. Like, so whenever I went, everybody associated my country with war, but we didn't have the war. We were not involved in it. So I'm a little bit sensitive to that too. I don't want to label somebody or a country or a person who comes from a country because they had a war or were surrounded by war that identifies them. And I'm a bit sensitive myself, you know, like, because especially with when I met Americans, they were like, oh, you know, how is it there now? And I'm like, well, what do you mean? Well, what? Like, okay. And of course, I can be angry, but I've heard it so many times that I am sensitive to prejudice in that sense, you know? So I'm trying to be careful as well. When I came to Vietnam, I realized that if anything, nobody really talks about war or has any prejudice against Americans nowadays. Everybody was just really welcoming personally, and you see all of the American brands around, like McDonald's and whatnot. So I think they're really welcoming. And to be fair, there aren't that many. It's a horrible thing to say, but there aren't that many that old people. Like, it's a very young society, generally speaking. So right now, these people were not born during the war. So whatever they know is from their grandparents, if they're still alive.
I've made this point many times before that it's in reference to what you're saying, right? So young people, 20 years old, right? The war finished in 1975. So you're 20 years old. You're born in 1995, crazily. So the war finished 20 years before you were born. I was born in 1982, so 20 years before my birth is 1962. The war ended, 1949? So I find it very similar. Like, when I grew up, I knew of World War II. I knew it existed. I knew my grandparents lived through it. I knew my grandmother went to bomb shelters. My grandpa was a little bit too young to go, but he was in the army after the war. So it existed, but at the same time, you're like, there's no remnants of the World War II. I mean, obviously, if you go to a museum or something like that, then yes. But in general life in Glasgow, where I'm from, there's no bomb craters. There's memories from your grandparents. But as a youngster, you're not growing up being it's not a big part of your life, at all. I do think it's interesting, though. You did say, and it's really, really interesting. In Vietnam, they don't have any ill will towards Americans, as far as I know. Generally, and I've spoken to Americans have come over here. There's almost zero ill will towards Americans. But in contrast, what is interesting, in the UK, we still have lingering, what's the word I'm looking for? We still have lingering animosity towards Germans, which I think is strange. Because even now, England have just hired a German manager for the football team. Obviously, I'm not English, I'm Scottish, but I do like the English national team. And I think most forward-thinking people don't give a shit. But then there's those right-leaning newspapers like the Daily Mail and all of these papers that still make a big deal about a German managing the English national team. And so it's interesting that we're kind of unforgiving in the UK. But here in Vietnam, they're like, yeah, Americans, come on, let's do it.
Yeah, I think it's actually quite, yeah, I agree. It's very interesting how societies deal with traumas. And it's very, as you said, like here in Vietnam, it's sort of, let's just move on. Let's live our lives, let's flourish, and collaborate with everyone, let's be friends. Whereas, as you said, in where you come from, there's still some kind of resentment going on. But it also, I think in different parts of the world, but as I said, I lived in Finland for a little while. Over there, nobody spoke about the war, the older generations, they were completely silent. It was so traumatic. So, and then where I come from, I'm talking about Second World War, people would talk and still be resentful for as long as they lived. So I think I don't know if it's a part of a national soul, whatever you can call it, to just have this thing going on that you either do express yourself or do not.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about it. It's very strange. And I'm saying this from a complete point of ignorance, which I'm normally speaking from a complete point of ignorance. But I wonder if it's that different way of thinking is due to, in Vietnam, they have more kind of Confucianism thinking. They're more Buddhist related, more Buddhist religion. I just wonder, I think it's probably just down to a completely different mindset that, like what you mentioned, they're much more tolerable and forgiving and ready to move on. Let's move on with this. It's happened. Whereas in the UK, we have a chip on our shoulder. And I don't know, I say the UK, but it's made up of 4 different countries. I don't know about the Welsh. I don't know about the Northern Irish. In Scotland, I don't see it too much, to be perfectly honest. So it kind of lands on the English shoulders that I wonder how much the English love to just still go on about the war. But anyway, enough about the war, as Basil Fawlty said. Let's move on. What were your first thoughts of Vietnam and Saigon when you came off that plane? What did you think for the first time?
I was shocked. I've been to hot places before. I was in India. Well, actually, look, the heat, I got it fine. I thought the traffic was actually more organized than I had anticipated because I had traveled around India beforehand. So I was expecting the same level here. It's sort of like it works out. It's completely chaotic, or was less now, but it kind of functioned. But one thing that is a negative thing that really struck me was the air pollution. I couldn't believe that I couldn't breathe, and like I come from a place with a lot of nature, so that was just a thing that I didn't know whether I was gonna be able to sustain living here. And the fact that it's so crowded, that there are so many people living within such small areas with really high population density, and the noises and the smells. So first couple of weeks were a bit tough because I was just bombed with my body was all of the senses were just attacked. The smell, the noise, the heat, everything, the taste buds. So it was a bit hard. Great, but challenging.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned India because that's the country that I've heard is most similar to Vietnam in terms of traffic. And we went to India last year, I've forgotten already, but we went to India recently last year. And the traffic, I think we could cope with it because we lived here. So the traffic was crazy and it was insane, but it was kind of like, meh, not really, like all the honking, all the beeping, all the craziness. You were just kind of like, if we'd come here without being in Vietnam, we would be like, this is crazy, this is insane. But because we lived here, we're like, well, it's pretty normal.
Yeah, exactly. I had exactly the same thought. Oh, by the way, I wanted to tell you earlier, just fun fact. You mentioned Confucianism and Buddhism here, but there's also a Catholic community. And fun fact is that the missionary who brought Catholicism here is Slovenian. He used to live in China for 20 years and then came to Vietnam and lived here for 20 years. Meitzen is his last name. So, and apparently, he had like a little monastery and his disciples, and apparently he was very strict but fair. And what I heard is that there still is a restaurant that phonetically speaking spells his last name. I haven't visited it. I didn't know it existed, but apparently there is one. So just a fun thing.
That is a fun fact. That is a good one. There you go. I do my Tuesday quiz nights. I'll put that in as a question. Where did Catholicism come from in Vietnam? I quite like that one. That's a good one. But you mentioned the heat as well. I mean, that's I think something that people talk about a lot when they get off the airplane or come out the airport, and then that heat just hits you. And I like what you're saying about the attack of the senses, because I think that is Vietnam, and the pollution is a kind of a bit of a hidden one because I don't really notice it so much. Like, I don't smell it. My wife, Adri, she'll smell it, which I'm like, wait, how can you smell this? She's like, do you leave the window open? I'm like, yeah. And she's like, I can smell the pollution. I was like, oh, I need fresh air. She's like, it's not fresh. Close the window. But I remember I looked up, you was talking about coming from a country with lots of nature. One time I made the mistake of looking up the air pollution in Glasgow or Bishopbriggs, where I'm from. And it was like 5.
Which means very, very clean.
Yeah, like I mean, the lowest is 0, so it's like 5. I was like, I think I looked out the window, it was like 150 here. I was like, oh my goodness. But I think it's sometimes getting better, and then you can take measures to avoid the air pollution so much. But then you got to Vietnam. What was your first dish? Can you remember the first thing you tried? What was your first food? What food did you get into, first of all?
I think for a solid 2 weeks, I was living on summer rolls because I loved them.
Yeah, right.
The summer rolls,
Yeah.
I just, that was the dish that was just my go-to. And Morning Glory, amazing. So because I liked it so much, I didn't really want to change it. So for that time, yeah, that's what I remember. Always, if they had it, I would choose that one. Summer rolls. That's an amazing dish. It's got everything you need and it's fresh. Yeah, vegetables and a little bit of shrimp.
That literally never comes up. So explain what a summer roll is.
It's a spring roll, but not deep fried. Like
yeah.
The wrap. It's slightly bigger than a regular spring roll. You might call it spring roll, but I think technically it's called a summer roll. So it's just the fact that it's not deep fried. It's got all of the ingredients and it's slightly bigger, and then you dip it in the fish sauce or a different
satay sauce, right?
Peanuts.
Yeah, the peanut sauce. Oh, I haven't had that in ages. Okay, I definitely want to get that. Now, the other thing I mentioned in the beginning, I want to ask you about Slovenian wine. First of all, tell me about Slovenian wine and how did you end up selling that here?
So even though there are a lot of countries with great wines, and well, Slovenia is one of them, not that known, but the wines are actually quite great. So we have white wines in the north, and then in the south, red wines. And like some of them are really, really great. Especially nowadays, I'm more into creating orange wines, which is basically, I think, white wine left for as long as red wine would be. So it gets like this kind of orange color, and it's just a fad, I think. But so for some reason, there was this lady, I saw that there was a shop opened with Slovenian wines, and I was fascinated. It's like, what? Like in the middle of Saigon, we have what? So I visited. I wanted to speak to the manager. I was like, hey, I'm Slovenian. Like, can I help you out? So the lady is Vietnamese, and she had a deal with the Vina Koper, which is a brand of wines in Slovenia, a big one. And she had these amazing wines. So I told her that I would be very happy to help her if she ever needs to have a representative. And I did, where we met at that sustainability festival, right? But I was a bit conscious about that, not because the wines are not good, but because those particular wines were a bit old already. They were like the old batch, and I was just worried that they had gotten spoiled, you know? Otherwise, I would have been very happy. But you know how it is, like when you're like, maybe it's like it's 2 years, blah, blah. And this climate also, I'm like, what if it's shit? Because, you know, if it's not stored properly, the temperatures are really high here. So I'm just self-conscious how my country is gonna look like. if you
Yeah,
taste
fair
it,
enough.
it's great. Oh my God, what is this? But I'll tell you, you know, back home, it's very common to have your own vineyard. Like my family has one, but it's a hobby. This is not good wines. This is different topic. We have really good wines, high quality, but then families in certain regions would just have like a hobby to have a small vineyard and make their own wine. So
What?
we like it. Yeah,
So you have lots of table wine for like dinner and things like this.
sure, yeah. It's,
Nice.
it's once I was at a very big party, so you know, you go pick the berries, right? At a friend's family, and they told me, I was like, oh, so how many liters of wine do you make? They're like, oh, about 400 liters. So I do a quick calculation. And I'm like, "Well, that's a lot. They probably sell it, right?" So I say that out loud. I made the mistake of saying that. I was like, so you probably sell some of the wine. And the grandfather of the family was genuinely shocked. Was like, no, we drink it. What are you talking about? And then I was like, okay, well, a year has 365 days, I guess.
Yeah, I was just doing the quick maths as you said that. I was trying to do it in my head and I was like, it's about a liter a day, roughly, right? Which is not a huge amount. It's just, especially if you're splitting it between a few people. But if you're doing that every day, yeah, I mean, that's not too much, I guess. But
I mean, they probably don't have it every day, but like, you know, when you have a party and there's a celebration and somebody has a birthday and the other person, and you know, then I kind of get it. But like my quick calculation, as yours was just like, yeah, everyone knows. So, so
we
I
couldn't
missed
do
that
that in
year by the
Scotland.
way. Sorry, what?
We couldn't do that in Scotland. The population would just collapse in on itself if we had our own vineyards in our back gardens.
Well, yeah, I believe you. So yeah, so everybody needs to be careful. But so here in Vietnam, like wine is quite pricey. So unfortunately, and if you
Yeah,
get
yeah,
long
for
term,
sure. And then if it's not imported, it's the lat wine, which we all know what that means when you say the lat wine. Did people? So first of all, did people hear like Slovenian wine and they one didn't know where Slovenia was, two thought it was going to be terrible like the lat wine, and three were they surprised when it was actually it was good? Because I remember we tried it and we bought a couple of bottles. I think I remember my aunt was visiting and she bought a bottle as well. It was good.
yeah, no, I have very positive feedback. Yeah, it was very nice. But unfortunately, they're not importing anymore. So I haven't seen them around for a couple of years after COVID. You know, COVID happened, and then it was just you can't do that. So Yeah.
Another COVID casualty, Slovenian wine in Saigon.
That was just a bizarre thing, to have. But very happy. No, we also have a representative, an honorary consul now from this year on, actually. Or, well, either it was late 2024 or early 2025, and he's Vietnamese. So the honorary consul of Slovenia is Vietnamese.
Nice. You mentioned Slovenia had 2 million people, and you have about 5 people here that you know of. And it had me thinking, like, so Scotland is 10 million people. And I would struggle to think of 5 Scottish people that I know even here in Vietnam. And I don't know them all, and we don't have a WhatsApp group, and I'm sure there's more, but yeah, we're not a big community either. And 2 of those 5 people are married to each other, so that counts as 1, I guess. And they've been on this podcast, Lee and Riz. So I don't know how many other Scottish people there are here. And we actually, I think Scottish people, we're like magnets. We go in the opposite direction. We don't attract to each other. And I don't know if that's a football thing because we all have different football teams and we can't get on as a people, but we generally don't kind of connect like other countries, like the Irish, where they all just come together and form Irish bars, which is amazing. But we talked about you being a teacher, and then now you're a singer, a writer, and an actor. So how did that transition come?
I've always loved acting. I've always done it since I was a kid, and I've always loved singing. But I was never brave enough to pursue it as a career. So when I was applying for for faculties, I chose education, and that's what I studied. But in reality, like, if I had the courage, I would have tried acting. It's just that it's, to take eight people a year. So I just couldn't risk it. I was just so shy, and it would, I'd die if I was rejected. It's a mindset thing. So anyhow, I taught for many years here, for like 10 years. And then, but I always acted as a side gig with Saigon Players, which is a community theater, and which is the show that you saw. I was a part of it, and then I directed for a little while. And then I'm singing also. When back home, singing is really big, but it's choir singing. So we always sing in groups. It's like, it's a hobby that people do. It's so common, Every village, every town has a couple of choirs, and it's a way to socialize. So but I wanted to kind of hear my own voice, even though it's not particularly attractive, but I just wanted to sing. So in recent years, I got a teacher, singing teacher, and I was singing jazz. And then she forced me to go out to open mics. It's so funny because I've acted for a long time, and to be on stage acting in a role is not a problem for me because I don't consider it being myself. It's a role that I am playing. It's not Alenka. So I might have stage fright for a little bit, but then it's fine. With singing, it does not transfer, not for me. I was like, this is my voice, this is me, this is my soul. I was shaking so hard, it was visible. The microphone was shaking when my teacher forced me to sing. It was in Thailand, and I remember the place, Soul Street. But what is it? Anyhow, we have number 9. So, but I wanted to break through, and when I got the opportunity to leave my work for a little while, I had some saved. I wanted to just give it a try. Because when you have a full-time job, it's great to have a hobby, but you can't make it your main thing. It's always a side gig, and I wanted to develop in those areas. So last year, when I had left full-time teaching, I got the opportunity to work for these vertical films that are becoming really huge in Vietnam. I don't know if you've heard of them. Vertical films? So
Mm-mm.
the productions here, okay, I'll explain. So first, I got a couple of jobs, and I actually got paid for acting. So that was amazing. That's not a common thing. Usually it was for charity. Like Saigon Players, everything goes to charity, and it's voluntary. And singing also from some time. So let me just say about the acting part. So there is a growing production here in Saigon, Hanoi, and generally in Vietnam, that started almost literally last year. And it's called Vertical Films. And these are TV shows designed for the phone. So it's like Instagram, like you scroll. So these are TV shows, Chinese TV dramas, basically, created for 3-minute episodes. And there's 100 of episodes. And you get hired here, and there's 1 week of shooting, 1 week only. You are there for 16 hours a day. And within a month or two, there will be a full TV show on the phone. So that's what's going on here. And a lot of my friends who are actors, like we kind of get these gigs because they're good. Like you can work 2-3 days or 7 days, depending on your role, and we love acting. So that's how I started calling myself an actor, because obviously beforehand I was like, well, not really. But then I was like, you know what? I'm getting paid for this. I'm gonna call myself. So it's a lucrative business. I just wrote about it because it's so big. It's in Southeast Asia. It's for the American market. So it's not for Vietnamese market. It's in English for the American market. And they pump tons of these. They're basically soap operas. So I had the opportunity to act like this crazy roles, like very black and white characters, like probably either super good, kind-hearted, or the complete opposite. Just everything's bad, And as much as this is not really a stretch in acting, I do appreciate the opportunity and the fact that it's paid. And I have a great experience, It's meeting people from all over the world. They fly them in also. And and to see how the process works, I'll be shooting a TV series. So that's been my journey in acting. That was a transition. And singing is still ongoing. But I just decided that I really needed to get out of my comfort zone. So I had to come to terms with the fact that when I sing, it might not sound great, but in order to become better, I need to expose myself. There's no other way, right? And actually, you're a comedian, right? Also, oh, you were stand-up. I know that you did stand-up. I visited you many times. And that's one thing I admire about stand-up comedians. I think that because it's a requirement that in order to get better, you guys need to bomb, right? There's no other way, right? Because that's how you learn. This works, it doesn't work. And this is so hard. It's one of the hardest things, like to be okay with not being great. So that was my inspiration. I was like, stand-up comedians, they do that all the time, and they have to accept it. And that's how they progress and they become brilliant, right? So I was like, okay, well, I'm going to sing. It's going to sound shit, but you know what? If I go to an open mic, at least my mindset is like, you know what? Nobody pays for this. It's an open mic, so stop it. So now I'm starting to get some gigs, and now I sometimes get paid, but a lot of times I still just sing for charity, because it's a way to give back to the community, but also I don't feel such pressure. It's like, okay, well, I'm doing what I can. That's the best they do right now. And hopefully at least somebody gets some benefit from it.
That is incredible. And especially the movies, like it's so 21st century. We now watch movies in 3-minute chunks, and it makes perfect sense. And I could get into that. Some of my favorite podcasts are like 8 minutes long, like fiction podcasts where it's a story with each episode is 8 minutes. And yeah, that's really, really cool. So well done on that, and making that transition from teaching to the arts. I mean, it's incredibly difficult. So well done. And Alenka, thank you so much. You're the first ever Slovenian guest on a Vietnam podcast, as far as I'm aware. This has been amazing. Thank you for sharing your story with us, and all the best with everything, singing, writing, acting. It's really, really exciting to see that transition. And thank you to you for tuning into this episode. Again, this podcast wouldn't exist without you. Best thing that you can do to help me and help this podcast is if you are passionate about Vietnam and you know other people that are passionate about Vietnam, then please share this podcast with someone else. Leave a review, give it a rating, unless it's less than 5 stars. If it's less than 5 stars, I don't want a review. Don't worry about it. Just 5-star reviews, please. That would be amazing. And also, thank you so much for tuning in. So, Alenka, thank you for being on a Vietnam podcast.
Thank you so much. This was really fun, and I'm really, really happy that I got a chance to be a part of it. Thanks. But I don't know if I'm gonna watch it because I'm like, oh my God. So, not
You
because
gotta
of
watch
you,
yourself.
obviously.
I'm terrible for that. I'm one of the few people that doesn't mind the sound of their own voice and watching myself on camera, but that's probably because I see myself so much when I do the editing and things like that. But you've been amazing, and I really, really appreciated your time. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Cheers.